All right, let's get right into it. Tonight, we're diving deep into Darkwood.
Oh, yeah, Darkwood.
This top-down survival horror game set in a very, very strange forest in Poland. You ready to get spooky?
I am ready. Born ready.
Perfect. So we've got some great material to work with. We've got excerpts from this super interesting video essay about the game and some developer commentary sprinkled in there.
Nice.
So we'll be pulling from both of those to really get to the heart of what makes Darkwood so unique.
Yeah.
Its mechanics, its atmosphere.
The story, even.
Yes, the story, exactly. But we'll be focusing a lot on how that story is told through the environment and the choices you make as a player.
Yeah. It's really something else. Right off the bat, Darkwood kind of throws you for a loop with its survival mechanics.
Oh, how so?
Well, you don't have to worry about the usual stuff like hunger or thirst, which sounds kind of nice, actually.
Yeah.
But what really gets you are the nights.
Ooh, the nights.
They are brutal.
Oh.
And you only get a limited number of lives.
Oh, wow. So permadeath.
Well, it's not quite permadeath, but pretty close.
Yikes.
Definitely keeps you on your toes. Every decision counts.
So it's not just about, like, hoarding supplies and building a fortress like in some other survival games.
It's more about thinking strategically, managing your resources, and knowing when to risk exploring for more and when to just hunker down and wait for daylight.
It sounds intense. In the source material, there's this bit about the protagonist eating these mushrooms.
Right.
Which, like, boost his abilities or something.
Yeah, they're supposed to make you stronger, faster,
Amazing.
maybe even give you some special powers.
Yeah.
But you never really know if they're actually working or if you're just hallucinating.
Oh, that's creepy.
The game plays with that a lot, blurs the line between reality and hallucination.
Yeah.
It keeps you guessing, which is a perfect segue into how the narrative unfolds.
Yeah. Yeah, let's talk about that. So Darkwood has this choose-your-own-adventure kind of vibe. It sounds like even the smallest decisions can snowball into some serious consequences.
Oh, absolutely. It's a branching narrative with multiple solutions to every problem.
So there's no right way to play.
Not really, but each path you choose comes with its own set of risks and rewards,
Yeah.
It makes you really weigh the consequences of your actions.
I read about this one early game choice. You encounter these two characters.
Where are they?
One's called the Wolfman, and the other is this musician.
Yeah.
It sounds like who you choose to help actually impacts the entire endgame.
Oh, for sure. It determines who you meet later, what quests you get, even how certain areas of the map change.
Wow.
But what's really interesting is that there are no easy answers. Like, neither the Wolfman nor the musician are these clear-cut good guys or bad guys.
Oh, I see.
So you're constantly grappling with these moral dilemmas.
It's all shades of gray, huh?
Exactly. It's up to you to navigate this world that's gone completely bonkers and figure out who to trust, if you can trust anyone at all. Which, speaking of, we should probably talk about the forest itself.
Oh, yeah. The forest, it seems like it's more than just a setting. Like, it's a character in itself, and a pretty terrifying one at that.
Totally. It's this oppressive presence, always lurking, always watching. The developers talked about wanting to create this sense of dread, of paranoia.
And they definitely succeeded. I've seen gameplay footage, and just the sound design alone is enough to give me nightmares. Like, I can just imagine the sounds, creaking branches, rustling leaves, things moving just out of sight.
Oh, they nail the sound. And it's not just the ambient noises. They have these dynamic events that happen at night.
Like what?
Like, oh, I don't know, objects moving on their own.
Oh, spooky.
Trees transforming into these grotesque shapes. Sometimes the ground even trembles. It's like some massive creature is moving beneath you.
It sounds like the forest is literally alive.
In Slavic folklore, forests are often seen as these places of danger and mystery, filled with creatures both magical and malevolent.
Right.
And Darkwood caps into that perfectly. The forest is this living, breathing entity, and it's clearly not on your side.
Okay, so we've got this creepy forest, these tough moral choices, and this constant feeling of dread. But what about the plague? What do we know about that?
Ah, the plague. Yeah, that's a whole other layer of messed up.
What do you mean?
You see its effects everywhere. Like literally, bodies fused into trees.
Oh, gross.
Creatures mutated into these horrifying hybrids. It's
Yeah.
like the forest is feeding off this sickness, growing stronger because of it.
So it's not just a disease, it's like a force of nature.
Right. Like something ancient and evil that's been awakened.
It's giving Lovecraftian vibes.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
The game never really explains the plague's origins, which adds to the mystery, of course, but also to this underlying sense of dread. Like, What if this is just the beginning?
Ooh, good point.
It makes you question what happens when we tamper with forces we don't understand.
So if the game doesn't give you clear answers, how are you supposed to figure out what's going on, like what to do next?
Well, that's where things get interesting. Darkwood relies heavily on environmental storytelling.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
It means you piece together the narrative through fragments.
Fragments of what?
Notes, photographs, overheard conversations, even the protagonist's own journal entries.
So it's like you're a detective piecing together a mystery, but the clues are scattered and open to interpretation?
Exactly.
I like that. In the source material, there was this example about a photo labeled "The Thieves."
Yeah. And finding that sends you on this whole quest line, right?
To figure out what?
The story of these 3 boys who tried to rob the village and what happened to them. It's a fantastic example of how Darkwood trusts the player to be curious, to explore, to connect the dots on their own.
So there's a lot of freedom in how you approach the game.
Tons. But even if you're the world's greatest detective, Darkwood doesn't guarantee a happy ending.
Oh, really? Not even a little bit of sunshine and rainbows at the end?
Nope. There are multiple endings, sure, but none of them are what you'd call victorious.
More like surviving with your sanity barely intact?
Exactly. Even the endings that seem hopeful have this unsettling detail where the protagonist's clothes are found in this final dream sequence.
Wait, what does that even mean? Like he never actually escaped?
It's left deliberately ambiguous, but it definitely casts a shadow over any sense of closure. Darkwood isn't a game about overcoming trauma, it's about enduring it. About how even if you escape, the experience stays with you, haunts you.
That is seriously messed up.
It is.
But also kind of brilliant. Like it makes you think, right?
Oh, absolutely. Darkwood sticks with you. It makes you think about what you would do in that situation, what choices you would make, knowing that escape might be impossible, knowing that even if you get out, a part of you will always be trapped in that darkness.
Wow, okay. That got deep fast, but I love it.
That's Darkwood for you. It gets under your skin.
Okay, so we've talked about the forest, the plague, the choices you have to make. But who is this protagonist? Like, how did he end up in this nightmare in the first place?
That's where things get even more intriguing. Because he's not just some random guy who wandered into the woods. There are hints that he might be part of something bigger, maybe even some kind of military operation.
Really?
There are these notes you can find written from the perspective of someone who seems to be in charge of a team, and they talk about capturing and experimenting on the infected.
Oh, wow. So they weren't just trying to survive, they were trying to, what, control the plague?
That's the implication.
Mm-hmm.
There are even mentions of trying to contain the situation, which makes you wonder if they're the ones responsible for some of the destruction you see.
So maybe they were trying to stop the plague from spreading, but what does that have to do with our protagonist?
Well, one of the notes mentions a plan to transport someone outside, and they refer to this person as a rat.
A rat.
Yeah.
That rings a bell.
Remember the guy who stole your journal at the beginning of the game?
Yeah.
He's also called a rat in some of the notes.
Wait a minute. Are you saying our protagonist is the rat?
It's a definite possibility. It would explain why he seems to recognize some of the hideouts you come across, like he's been there before, and why he seems to have these strange abilities.
Like what?
Well, the fact that he doesn't need to eat or drink anymore.
Yeah, that's weird.
And the way he can use those mushroom injections to gain these unnatural powers.
He's almost like superhuman?
Maybe. And it's possible that whatever happened to him, whatever changed him, is connected to the plague. Maybe he was part of their experiments.
Okay, so we've got this mysterious protagonist who might be more than human.
Yep.
A plague-ridden forest that seems to be alive, and a group of people experimenting on the infected.
Yep.
This does not sound like it's going to end well for anyone.
No, it does not. But that's what makes Darkwood so compelling.
Right. It's a descent into a world where the lines between sanity and madness, humanity and monstrosity are constantly blurred, and where every step you take could be your last.
But it's in those final steps, those desperate choices, that Darkwood reveals its true brilliance.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork, explored the choices, and delved into the darkness. Where does this twisted path lead?
To find out, we need to follow the protagonist deeper into the heart of the forest. And that's a journey we'll begin in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good to me.
So we're picking up where we left off last time. We're following the protagonist deeper into Darkwood, right into this area called the Dry Meadow.
Oh, okay. Dry Meadow. I vaguely remember seeing that on the map. What's it like?
It's kind of like the game's starting area. No matter how the map gets randomized, that's always where you spawn.
So everyone who finds themselves in this nightmare starts in the dry meadow. Is it any safer than other areas?
It's relatively safe.
Yeah.
Especially compared to the later areas.
But relatively being the key word, right?
Like, it's still Darkwood.
Yeah.
It's not exactly a walk in the park.
Right. It's just less of a total nightmare than other places.
Exactly.
This is where we first meet the Wolfman, isn't it? He seems
Yeah.
to be a pretty important character.
Oh, he's absolutely crucial. The Wolfman is, well, he's a complicated guy.
Grosso.
On the one hand, he's this brutal, cunning survivor. He's not afraid to manipulate you, use you to get what he wants.
Which is?
The pretty lady.
Oh, right, pretty lady. Who is she and what does the Wolfman want with her?
Well, she's another survivor, but she's being held captive by something, somewhere.
Okay.
And the Wolfman, well, he's obsessed with her, but let's just say his intentions aren't exactly noble.
So you're presented with a choice, right? Do you help the Wolfman knowing he might not be a good guy, or do you try to find another way to free this pretty lady?
There's actually a third option. There's this musician who's also searching for the pretty lady.
Whoa, a love triangle. And Darkwood, that's a new one.
It's not exactly a love triangle, but it does add another layer to the story.
So siding with the Wolfman or the musician, each path comes with its own consequences, I assume.
Absolutely. Nothing is simple in this game.
We should probably talk about the Silent Forest hideout now, right? Sounds like it's supposed to be a safe haven.
It's the first hideout you discover, and it becomes your base of operations, essentially.
Okay.
You can fortify it, upgrade your crafting station, do all the usual survival stuff.
Because when night falls, you better be prepared.
Oh, yeah. The nights in Darkwood, there's something else. Like, that's when the real horror kicks in.
What kinds of things happen at night?
Well, the creatures come out, for starters.
Ooh, what kind of creatures?
Rabid dogs, mutated humanoid things, all sorts of nasty surprises. The developers really went all out with the creature design. It's impressive, really.
And I bet they sound even worse than they look.
Yeah, the sound design is incredible. You're often fighting in near darkness, so you have to rely on your hearing to know what's coming at you. The way they use sound to create tension and atmosphere is just masterful.
And the forest is constantly changing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like literally changing. Paths disappear, new areas open up. You never know what you're going to find around the next corner. The dynamic map system is one of the things that makes the game so replayable.
So you can explore the same area multiple times, but it's never exactly the same experience.
Exactly. It keeps you on your toes, never lets you get too comfortable, which is a theme we see again and again in Darkwood.
Yeah, that sense of unease, like the forest is always watching you, waiting for you to make a mistake. But okay, so we've got this creepy forest, terrifying monsters, a protagonist who might be part of a government conspiracy, and these choices that seem to spiral into even bigger mysteries. But what about the actual story? Like, how do you actually escape this nightmare?
That's the big question, isn't it? And Darkwood doesn't give you any easy answers. The story's really fragmented. You have to piece it together yourself through these little clues and hints scattered throughout the world. Remember the shiny stones we mentioned earlier?
Oh, yeah. Are they like breadcrumbs leading you towards the exit?
Not exactly. They do seem to be guiding the protagonist, but towards what? It's not clear. Following them leads you deeper into the forest, into increasingly dangerous areas. The game is basically daring you to follow them and see what happens.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It might be, but it also might be the only way to uncover the truth about the plague, about the protagonist's past, about everything.
We also meet a lot of other survivors along the way, don't we?
Yeah, there are quite a few. Some are helpful, some are dangerous, some are just weird.
The musician we talked about earlier, for example, he seems like a pretty interesting character.
He's fascinating. He's got this whole philosophical side to him. He's constantly talking about the nature of reality, the power of the forest, all this deep stuff.
He's like the opposite of the Wolfman.
In a lot of ways, yes. The Wolfman is all about brute force, survival at any cost. The musician is more introspective, more focused on understanding the bigger picture.
And depending on your choices, he can actually become a valuable ally.
He can, but helping him often comes with its own set of challenges. It might make the game more difficult in some ways, but it also leads to a richer, more meaningful experience.
So you're basically choosing between two paths. The Wolfman's path, which is about power and survival, or the musician's path, which is about understanding and maybe even finding some kind of peace in this messed up world.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
But do they both lead to the same goal, escaping the forest?
Well, escaping the physical forest might be possible, but escaping the experience, The trauma, that's a different story altogether.
So it's not just about getting out, it's about what you become along the way.
Darkwood forces you to confront the darkness within yourself. It asks you,
Yeah.
what are you willing to do to survive? And those choices, they have consequences.
Consequences that ripple throughout the game, shaping not just your fate, but the fate of everyone around you.
Exactly. And it's all done so brilliantly. The way Darkwood blends environmental storytelling, psychological horror, and this really unique survival gameplay is just, it's masterful. It's a game that stays with you,
Yeah.
long after the credits roll. It makes you think about the true meaning of survival.
So we've explored the choices, delved into the darkness, and tried to make sense of this twisted story. But the big question remains, does he actually make it out? Is there any hope of escaping this nightmare?
To find that out, we need to follow the protagonist on his final perilous journey. A journey that leads him to the heart of the forest, to a confrontation with the very source of the plague.
This is it, folks. The moment of truth. Let's dive into the final chapter of our Darkwood deep dive. All right, so this is it. The final chapter of our Darkwood deep dive. Last time, we left off with the protagonist heading towards the heart of the forest, the source of the plague. Where does this last leg of the journey take us?
Deep into the swamp. This is where things get really intense.
I've heard things about the swamp. It's supposed to be pretty rough. What makes it so different from the other areas?
Well, for one, it's visually striking. Everything is damp and decaying. The air is thick with the smell of rot. It feels like the world itself is dying. And the sound design, just thinking about it gives me chills.
Yeah. What is it about the sound that's so creepy?
It's this constant dripping, gurgling, and croaking, like something's always lurking just beneath the surface. And the creatures you encounter in the swamp, they're some of the most disturbing in the entire game.
The swampers, right. I've seen pictures. They look like something out of a nightmare.
They are straight up nightmare fuel.
Yeah.
Humans mutated into these grotesque crocodile-like beings. And they're perfectly adapted to this environment. They can blend in with the murky water, ambush you when you least expect it. Just traversing the swamp is a nerve-wracking experience.
And then there's the old woods hideout. From what I remember, it didn't look very inviting.
It's definitely the most challenging of all the hideouts to defend. Limited space, constant enemy attacks. It really tests your survival skills.
So you're not just trying to survive the night, you're also trying to fortify your position and hold out against these relentless attacks.
Exactly. And on top of that, you have all these other survivors you encounter in the swamp, each with their own agendas and motivations.
Right. The doctor is one who comes to mind. This is where we finally come face to face with him, isn't it?
We do. And we meet this group of villagers who are just desperate to survive. But they're also incredibly suspicious of outsiders.
I mean, who can blame them, considering everything they've been through? What about the chicken lady? What's her deal?
The chicken lady. She's a force of nature, that one. Seems to have this strange connection to the chickens who, for some reason, are immune to the plague.
Immune? How is that even possible?
The game doesn't really explain it. Like a lot of things in Darkwood, it's just left open to interpretation.
Yeah.
But she definitely plays an important role in the story. And her motivations, well, let's just say they're not always clear.
So, can you ever really trust anyone in this world?
That's a constant question you're wrestling with in Darkwood. Who do you trust? Who do you help? Who do you betray? Every decision has consequences.
The source material also mentioned a talking tree. That sounds a little too fairy tale for a game like Darkwood.
Oh, the talking tree is very real. And it's a central figure in the swamp's lore. A massive, sentient tree that blocks the final exit from the swamp.
So, to escape, you have to deal with this talking tree.
You do. But it's not a conventional fight. You have to unravel its secrets, understand its connection to the plague, find a way to weaken it.
It sounds almost symbolic, like this ultimate battle against the source of the infection.
That's a great way to put it, because in many ways, that's exactly what it is.
Speaking of the source, this is also where we finally start to learn more about the protagonist's past, right?
Yeah, a lot of the pieces start falling into place in the swamp. We discover he's most likely a member of this group called the Outsiders, who were sent in to deal with the plague. But their methods were, let's just say they weren't exactly ethical.
Right. We found those notes earlier about their experiments on the infected. It sounds like they were willing to do whatever it took to contain the plague, even if it meant sacrificing innocent lives.
Exactly. Which makes you wonder about the protagonist, right? Was he a subject of their experiments? Is that how he gained his abilities?
It's a very real possibility, and it adds a whole other layer of tragedy to his story.
He's not just fighting against the forest. He's fighting against his own past, his own creators.
But even if he manages to escape, even if he defeats the talking tree and gets out of the swamp, then what? Is there really a way out of this nightmare?
That's the thing about Darkwood.
Hmm?
It doesn't give you easy answers. The ending is ambiguous.
How so?
On the surface, it seems like the protagonist makes it back to civilization. He wakes up in his own apartment.
So he escapes. A happy ending.
Not quite. There are these little details that suggest things might not be what they seem. For one, his apartment is completely empty. No personal belongings, no signs of life.
Okay, that's creepy.
And then there's this final dream sequence where he finds himself back in the forest.
So is he still trapped?
It's never explicitly stated. Darkwood leaves that up to the player to decide.
Man, this game really messes with you. But that ambiguity, it's also kind of brilliant, isn't it?
It is, because it forces you to confront the idea that maybe there is no escape. Maybe the forest, the plague, the trauma, maybe it all stays with you.
Even if you make it out alive, a part of you is always stuck back there. Wow. Okay. I need a minute to process all this.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. It's intense, but also incredibly fascinating.
Darkwood is a game that stays with you. It makes you think, makes you feel, makes you question everything you thought you knew about survival horror.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Mm.
The creepy forest, the plague, the choices, the endings. But what's the takeaway? What does it all mean?
I think at its core, Darkwood is a story about resilience, about finding the strength to keep going, even when everything seems hopeless, even when the world is falling apart around you. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's still that glimmer of hope inside us.
And that even in the face of unimaginable horror, humanity can endure.
Exactly.
This has been an experience. I have to say, I'm both terrified and completely captivated by Darkwood. Thank you so much for guiding us through this twisted world. I don't think I could have done it without you.
It was my pleasure. Darkwood is a game that demands to be discussed, analyzed, debated.
It definitely gives you a lot to think about. And to all our listeners out there, if you're looking for a truly unique and unforgettable horror experience, I highly recommend checking out Darkwood. Just be prepared to face the darkness within yourself.
And remember, the forest is always watching.